Oi, oi, oi. Yes, we gaan beginnen. Yo. Allez, Lucas. Good evening, all of you. I'm going to do this in English because not everyone speaks Dutch. It was the 5th of November in the year 2019. And I was working on a strategy. In the studio, I work in Brussels, and I was kind of confused. You know, in the creative process, there's always this phase. In the beginning, you start a project, and you're like, yeah, I'm super excited, and you have great ideas, and everything looks exciting. And then there's always this phase coming right after that, where you're like, maybe it's not that great at all what I'm doing. So I was working on the strategy, and I was thinking, actually at the studio where we're working, we've been doing strategy for like, I don't know, 15 years. But what is this based on? We've just been doing this forever. I think at some point someone read a book on it, and we started to figure out how to do strategy. But at the same time, I knew there is a lot of agencies in Belgium, right? And in those agencies, obviously, there is a lot of strategists. And all those strategists are doing different types of strategy, which is always interesting because all of them should probably influence each other. I'm actually working on the verge of brand strategy and digital strategy. I guess there's some content strategists here. Some people are doing business strategy, marketing strategy, social media strategy. You see the pattern, right? Communication strategy. I think there's even some people doing strategy. But in the end, there is no official education. There's no degree on strategy. So basically, I think we're all just trying to figure stuff out. We all do strategy our own way, and there's no like real benchmark, I think, at some point. As we're doing it, we all have our own struggles, I think. We all have our own successes. But we don't really share our experiences. I mean, at least, I shouldn't speak for all of us, but that's kind of that was my point of view on the subject. And I really, as I was sitting there, 5th of November, I was really like, come on, maybe I'm just doing this wrong. So how are all the others doing it? I wondered. But then I was like, who are all these other strategists? So I wrote a tweet at, as you can see, early in the morning, 9:30 a.m. I was like, maybe we should try and meet up with all those strategists. And I Googled, like, probably something like, who is doing strategy in Belgium? And I saw two names, Stef Hamerlink and Freddy, Nonkel Freddy. So I was like, I'm going to CC them. At least we have 3 people at the meetup then. And I mean, much to my surprise, the tweet got, I mean, lots of debate started around the tweet. It had 21 likes. In my case, that's a lot, because usually I have 1 like. So 21 probably meant something. So we decided to make it happen, which is crazy. I mean, I remember when talking with Stef and Freddy, the first time I actually saw those guys was at the bar here in Ghent. And we were like, yeah, you know, there's going to be 5 to 10 people maybe, and look at all of you. I mean, it's insane, it's crazy. So thank you all very much for being here. I think it's amazing, it's great. Dikke merci also to In The Pocket, they are hosting this. I mean, there's even a live stream of this event. We had pizza, we have beers. Thank you, Freddy. And everyone at In The Pocket. You're probably wondering, who the fuck is this guy? My name is Thomas. I work at Base Design. We do branding. We have a studio in Brussels, in New York, Geneva, and Melbourne. I also teach digital design at Lucas School of Arts. And since a few weeks, I also started a podcast with the first speaker of tonight, Stef. It's in Dutch. It's called Opgemerkt, and you should check it out. So we have 2 amazing speakers tonight. I'll shut up. They are also 2 amazing co-hosts. The second one is Frederik de Bossere, Uncle Freddy. He's a lead strategist at this very company. So at In The Pocket, they're mostly doing digital product strategy, but he'll tell you all about it. He also has a podcast called Computer Club, also in Dutch. You need to check it out. It's amazing. And the first speaker is Stef Hamerling. Stef is working at Olly, a branding studio in Ghent. And he's mainly doing strategy. So it's going to be about brand strategy. Voila, that's all I had to say. I'll give the word to Stef. If you want to tweet and gram like never before, you can use this hashtag. That would be super cool. Thank you very much. Stef.
Oh, die wacht. Okay, I got it. Okay, everything seems to be working. Hi everyone, so I'm Stef Hamerling, as Thomas mentioned, and today we will be talking about the official ultimate guide on making strategy mistakes. Or, let me get this clicker, how I fuck up strategy. I'm Stef Hamerling, I'm a brand strategist. A little bit about myself, not too much, because I don't want to bore you. So I started Olly back in the day with my brother, who's also here. It was about 10 years ago and was named Cloud Studio back then. We were kind of like your typical full-service agency. We did anything for everyone, basically, and very cheap. But then we learned after a decade of doing design and marketing and branding, we started understanding what was really about. And so we rebooted Cloud Studio to Olly, which is today a brand experience studio with a focus on brand strategy and design. I'm also a huge fan of podcasting, as you might have heard already. And I have the Let's Talk Branding podcast, which was really like a starting point for me that fueled my journey in understanding brand strategy, because I didn't know what people were out there or what knowledge was out there. So I just started asking them and interviewing them. And so that's the Let's Talk Branding podcast. And then recently with Bitte, that's his nickname, I started the Opgemerkt podcast, which is really a lot more just like casual fun, but it's also a lot of interesting stuff about branding and marketing. Let's get back to the topic. So before I can talk about my mistakes in strategy, I think we need to have some kind of common definition of what strategy is. You might not agree, of course, but let's try. So as Thomas mentioned, all of you here, I don't know in what types of strategy you are. Maybe you're not in strategy, but we all know there's a lot of strategy, brand strategy, marketing strategy. Maybe there's marriage strategy. I don't know who does that, but might be interesting actually. So what is strategy? I think this is a really good definition. It's by Mark Pollard, who's a brand strategist. So strategy is an informed opinion on how to win. There's a couple of components to that definition. I'd like to break it down. So first off, informed, it's not just an opinion, because I think we know on social media, everyone has an opinion about anything, and that's fun, but it's not really strategy. It's just having an opinion about something. It might be at your local soccer team screaming at the field about how they should be more offensive or defensive. But if it's not really informed, it's just an opinion. So informed means you need to understand who the competitors are, who the customer is, like understand your client, understand the category you're working in. So that's a really important component, of course. It's also an opinion. It's not science in the literal sense. It's not just data that you talk about. It is an assessment of risk. Strategy is not just saying, this is the ultimate way forward and we know 100% for certain it's going to work. That's not the case. So it is an opinion. You need to realize that you and the client together have some form of belief together that this will work. So strategy is never 100% safe. And of course, this may sound a bit Gary Vee-ish, but it's true. Strategy is about winning, of course, because just having an informed opinion about something to lose, that might be good, but that's not a solid strategy, I mean. So winning is really important. Even, for example, Sun Tzu, which is like the OG strategy book, if we can say that, is really, sometimes you can let go of one battlefield, but you're never planning strategy to lose the war eventually. So that's really important, I think. So that was the definition. Strategy is an informed opinion on how to win. I hope we can all agree on that somewhat. If you don't, then please shout, or not right now, maybe. Okay, let's move on. So we were going to talk about mistakes, my mistakes, of course. So my biggest fuck-ups, I'm gonna try 10 because that's a nice number. And as we all know, listicles work really well on social media, so I hope this goes viral. I don't think it will, but let's try. First, the first mistake is me, myself, and I. So what does that really mean it's thinking that the strategy is about your opinion, about your assumptions about the project. It's what they call a self-fulfilling prophecy. So you like certain things or you hate certain things, and you kind of basically try to fill in the strategy that way. But that's of course not the right way forward. So thinking, I won't buy this, nobody will, is a really dangerous assumption, of course. For example, Dash. As a designer, I always thought that this was really ugly packaging. I mean, look at it. It's crazy. But that's my ego talking. I mean, I love clean, minimal design. And I thought, like, if I could get my hands on this project, I would make a beautiful design and everybody would love it. But in fact, the way this packaging has been created and thought about throughout the years is not just like on per accident. There's a lot of science behind this, why this works, why people recognize this. So again, putting your own ego in the project without understanding the full context is dangerous when you're helping your clients with strategy. The Kampioenen, I really hate this show. I don't know about you guys. Probably some people right now are thinking, well, I kind of like it. It's funny, it has a heritage, but I don't like it. But again, if I'm doing strategy, then that doesn't mean that it's about my opinion. Of course, you can't be objective. I mean, we all have our own context, our own minds, our own, like our parents have brought us up a certain way, so we can't just say, well, I'm the objective expert. You always have your assumptions. So it's less about being objective, and it's more about acknowledging those assumptions, knowing they are there, and also telling your client about them. So let's suppose the Kampioenen came to me and they said, we need a rebrand. Well, obviously they do, because it's not working. And the first thing I would try to say to them is like, sorry guys, but I think your show is lame. And I think that's important to tell them, because if you don't, this will haunt you later on in the project because you will always be biased and your client won't know that about you. So I'm sorry, Maxke, but fuck you too. Okay, another point in this case is, of course, I would love this, so everybody will. Here's a famous example. This was a Tropicana rebrand where they did like a big rebrand for the packaging, and everybody thought it was going to be great. But actually, oh, sorry, let me go back. They lost 30 million in sales. The real problem here wasn't that they were just rushing it or that it was amateur hour. There was some serious research behind this. There was some serious strategy behind this. They actually did focus groups about this packaging, but the problem was they were asking the wrong questions. The idea was, is this packaging more modern? That's what they asked people. But of course it's more modern if you look at the after. I mean, it looks a lot more cleaner. The problem is they didn't ask the right questions because they already thought from the moment the strategy started, we need a more cleaner design. But that's the real problem. So acknowledging those assumptions, they would have probably done a better job of understanding what works about this strategy, about this packaging and this packaging. Another big issue in our industry, again, it's about how we, as marketers or strategists, think about the products we buy and the strategies we create. If you look at this graph, for example, marketers, strategists, they really love choice. But if you ask the average UK adult, they're not really such a huge fan of it. That might mean that you create a strategy for your client that's giving your consumers all the choice, but that might also mean that the average consumer isn't really into it that much. So realize the context, the industry you're working on, realize your own biases. First point. Gonna try and go a little bit faster because I know it's a lot of points. So second one, Holy Grail. What's that about? It's really about finding the Holy Grails and knowing that when something sounds so simple, there's probably something wrong. It's too easy. So there's no single explanation that can explain why a company really works. We see in every industry there's trends. Sometimes it's content that's king, other times it's company culture, it's disruption, innovation. You probably know all of these things, but it's just not that simple. Let me give you an example from brand strategy, for example. So brand purpose, it's a big topic in our industry. I can geek about it all day long with Thomas on the podcast. But there's a lot of research that says, well, people are now buying based on their beliefs. So your brand purpose, why you are actually here in the world is really important. And that might sound really good, and it might sound like it's logical, but actually, if you look at science done well, if you let people range why they are buying, so the factors that are deciding how they buy, you see that, for example, in this research, the company's environmental or social stance is really not that important. So again, brand purpose isn't a bad thing, but if you use it as the holy grail, as the only way you think your brand will win, you're probably going to have a bad strategy. Another one, a really popular topic in brand strategy is brand loyalty. So it's the idea that if you are this authentic brand, people will come to you, they will flock to you as amazing fans or raving fans. We've had that on our website, so I don't suppose that it's something that makes a lot of sense, but it's something that was always there and it's really popular in brand strategy. This idea of brand loyalty. If we can get people to buy more instead of investing in always looking for new customers, that's a great idea, right? It sounds amazing. Why wouldn't it work? Well, actually, Byron Sharp, who's a professor in marketing science, has shown that brand loyalty is something that really is only available if you have a lot of market share. So while the strategy might be to gain more loyalty, the strategy should be to gain more market share, and then you can create more loyalty. So this doesn't sound as fun, right? I think The idea of brand purpose and brand loyalty speaks to us as human beings, and it's really something that we can work on, but it's not the holy grail. So don't think of it as a negative thing, but just realize that it's not always the single explanations. Mistake number 3, there is no elephant. So avoiding the elephant in the room is something I've done a lot of times, maybe because I'm just a bit conflict averse. I don't know how that works, but it's something we all do, I think, from time to time. But if you're doing strategy, you need to realize that you're kind of directing the narrative, so you're in charge here. Excuse me. So a couple of red flags, some things you need to pay attention to. Ignoring the misfit. So really, if you're talking to your client, the first conversations are really crucial, actually. It's something where you do need to pay attention to what your gut is telling you, because oftentimes we ignore the fact that this person isn't really trusting us, he isn't really respecting us. And that's an issue, because that will hunt you down later in the project. So instead of ignoring the fact that it's not a fit, try to just lean into that and maybe have a conversation about that. I know it's not easy. I'm not one to talk about this because I ignored it many times. But nowadays, I try to be more mature about it. And if we're in a meeting, I try to address these issues. Another one, it's similar, of course, is avoiding friction. But friction is not always the fit between you and your client. It might be an issue you feel, for example, in the team between the stakeholders that are there. Maybe they're not communicating well with each other. And that's also something you might not think is your role, but again, it will come back and bite you in the ass if you don't address it some way, somehow in the strategy. I'm not saying you should try to be a therapist in any session and just throw it in your client's face, like, you guys aren't working together, this is not gonna work. But just try to mirror it in some way, try to bring it up in a subtle way so you can have a conversation about it. It's usually in that friction that there is actually some insight. And postponing, of course, is somehow a logical consequence to this all. If you feel there is something going wrong, oftentimes what you do is you try to postpone it to another meeting, or you just hope it will magically disappear, but trust me, it won't. Mistake number 4, so not FOMO this time, but FOCO, fear of contacting others. So it's really simple actually, but it is something that I avoided for a long time. We have all these amazing tools, digital tools, to help us tracking, understand the data, analyze behavior, that sometimes we forget the most basic approach can be just to have a conversation with a human or maybe observe them in a physical setting. Now, I know that's not always applicable for purely digital software or whatever, but sometimes having conversations with users or humans, as we like to call them, it can be really helpful and give you juicy insights that you could never find if you just stick to behind your monitor. So I think contact others is really important. Another one, double checking might sound like it's enough. I mean, that's already something a lot of people don't do. They just they go on the brief and that's it. But when you're in strategy, I say double checking is really not enough. You need to look at what kind of data are you getting? What kind of inputs are you getting? A lot of times we start with the client's brief, and that might be enough if you're just trying to follow on that. But if you are talking with your clients about the future of their business, it might not be enough. So I think triangulation is a fancy word, but it's really just trying to look at what data points you have and trying to make sure you have enough. So let's say you have these interesting conversations with customers and you find out this amazing insight. That's really cool. And you might call it a day. You might say, well, that's the strategy. The issue is really that insight may be not enough. I mean, you might have a sample size that's too small and that skews the data. So look at, for example, do a quantitative survey. Make sure that this insight is found back in other data points. Look at industry reports. Of course, you might not find the same insights. It might be a little bit more nuanced, but again, that's what strategy is about. It's an assessment of risk. So if you find this insight and you can triangulate it and explain your client as that this might be a tangent, then at least you have the same understanding. So this is a quote by Robert E. Rubin, Secretary of State, something, I don't know. Again, it's about the idea of, once you've internalized that idea of there is no absolute truth, then your strategy is really about trying to find out as much as possible so you can at least try to deal with that risk. We're halfway there, well, past halfway, so getting along. Missing the point. So, of course, we can miss the points in many ways. I think especially when we're starting to work with data. For example, I'm not a scientist at all. I actually really a little bit chaotic. But once I started doing strategy, I realized that I needed to do more research. I couldn't just base it on what me and the client were saying. So I started looking at data, but of course looking at data is not such an easy thing. You need to think about a lot of things. So, for example, vanity metrics such as bounce rates are really interesting. I mean, a bounce rate, you can learn a lot from that. It's like when a visitor comes to a page and then he leaves that page going back to Google instead of clicking through to any other page. Correct me if I'm wrong. But a bounce rate, the issue is, for example, industry standards say, well, your bounce rate needs to be low. Okay, sounds great. But actually, it depends on the goal of what you're trying to do. For example, you might have a page where you want the user to have all the information, and then after he's done, he's just gone. I mean, that could be a really high bounce rate. Your goal could be 100% bounce rate, as a matter of speaking. So again, think about this context and don't just present vanity metrics. Our good friends at Fox, of course, a beacon of journalism and neutrality, as you all know, they're really good at misrepresenting data, but it's really important to not just take facts as they are, just look at what's really happening. For example, they magnified the y-axis here, just to make a point. Or why not just ditch the y-axis altogether? I saw this tweet some days ago. Actually, it doesn't make sense once you really start looking at it. I mean, between the car and the man on the moon, there were no technological inventions whatsoever. So a beautiful point if you want to make it like that, but if you want to use this in your strategy, this would not be a proper source, of course. So always look at these labels. Another big issue is correlation versus causation. So it's not because ice cream sales are going up that shark attacks are going up. It's actually because of the hot weather. Both of these things are happening. But again, you might look at this data and say, well, if we put more sharks in the sea, we'll have more ice cream sales. That might be a really good strategy. Not for sure, though. Another great example of good statistics that don't deliver you any real insights. This is a small example I wanted to share. So a couple of months ago, I was working on a case with a client, and they had a really disruptive pricing model. So I started doing interviews with their customers, and we had some really great feedback. People were really excited about their service. They said, well, it's really great. He was really authentic. He was really transparent. We really loved working with him. Well, this was really good. We were really happy. But actually, sometimes we need to look at what's not in the data, what's not represented. And what was not represented in this case was that nobody mentioned the fact that they had a disruptive business model. They had a disruptive pricing model, but nobody noticed. So that's a huge thing to work on. And if you just said, well, the reviews are good, congratulations, let's move on, you missed the point again. Mistake number 7, strategy that isn't actionable. So you know, strategy is just a bunch of words on paper if you don't have any execution, of course, that we all know. But so strategy is tactics then, right? Well, not really. Strategy is a guiding policy, but it's not the actual tactics. Let's take this fictional case. It's called Boo Boo Burger. And let's say we've done our research. We know what the customer what the customer needs are. We know what the competitors look like. We know what the industry looks like. So we defined this strategy. We know that Boo Boo Burger is a less meat, more fun approach. It's a positive attitude. There's no judgment. It's about loving animals, all this stuff. It's fictional, so don't worry. One of the tactics might be to have a children's farm on the parking lot. Might be a great idea. You get families there, they all see it's about loving animals, and it's not about spreading any negative message about people that eat meat. It's just about saying, look, we love animals, happy to join. So that might be a great tactic. Boo Boo Burger, go. Sorry. Boring Burger is another case, but here the strategy is not well defined. There isn't any good competitive analysis. We don't really know what the customers want. We just know, well, it's gonna be, let's say, quality burgers, crafted burgers, any type of that generic stuff that's actually just copying the competitors. And we know we want to sell burgers. If you give this briefing to a team, you might get 100 tactics idea or 1,000, but like what is really relevant to the strategy, it's really hard to define. So let's say this would be the Boo Boo Burger case, where we still get a lot of tactical ideas, but they're all in this strategic safe zone where we actually relate it to the insights we got. Otherwise, it's just tactics for tactics' sake. So this might be our boring burger, wow, alliterations, boring burger case. Almost there. So Fluff and Buzz, two interesting family members. Let's start with Buzz. So buzzwords are an amazing thing. I mean, it makes you sound like an expert, it makes you look like an expert, and you can use it in front of your kids and they won't understand you. It's easier than learning French, right? So the big issue with buzzwords is really, there's a couple of things. First, you're setting some sort of expectations for your client, because he might expect something different from the word strategy than you. He might look at the word authentic and think something completely different. He might think, well, all millennials think like this, and you might think, well, I'm a millennial, I hate the Kampioenen, for example. So it's really hard to use these words because you're actually creating distance between you and your client. So think about that when you're using buzzwords, like what are the expectations I'm setting here? Fun fact, we have a buzzword, beer, tonight, developed by Ollie, so by me and my team. If you want to grab one after this and have a talk about disruptive, holistic storytelling millennials, by all means, go ahead after the talk. You can grab some beers and we can have a conversation about it. The funny little nephew of buzzwords is called Fluff, and it's one of strategists' favorite things. I really love writing lengthy manifestos about brands that really go into the high atmospheres. But the issue is, once you go too high, it's actually completely irrelevant for the brand. I mean, you've seen those vision and mission statements that are actually completely irrelevant to what the product is. So always make sure you can relate back your purpose to your product and make sure that it's not too fluffy, because you will lose customers. Okay, number 9, big-headedness. So you all might not know this, but I'm a bit stubborn. My wife might know this, she's here. That's not a bad thing per se, but the issue is in strategy is sometimes there's this thing called the sunk cost fallacy, where you've invested too much time into one direction and you can't let go. I've been there many times where I found these insights that I thought was like, this is the best insight I can possibly have, so I can't let go of this direction. But maybe it's a competitor you've missed, maybe it's some expert, maybe it's a customer's opinion that you didn't hear. But sometimes you need to let go of this direction, because if all the signs are there that it's time to let go, then you can't be that stubborn, and you need to forget the time that you've invested in this. So be open and know when to pivot. Another noun translated into a verb, because that's also a hype, apparently, checkboxen. So checkboxen is about using the same frameworks over and over again. That's also something we love to do as brand strategists, is have frameworks. There's a lot of pyramids and weird-looking shapes that we use to define a brand, and it's all really great. I mean, these are helpful tools, but the issue is, once you start just duplicating your brand strategy deck and just filling in the words again, you're gonna run into trouble, because not every framework is a solution for every strategy. So I say use these as like primers to start your thinking. Just when you're a bit lazy, you had a bad Monday morning, take one of the frameworks and try to fill it in, see if the strategy works, but don't use them as like your fundamental starting point. There's a bonus fuck up, so I couldn't keep it under 10, I'm sorry. The last one, it's meh. So what does that mean? It's when you've done your strategy and you look around in the room, everybody's looking at you and it's a bit like, well, yeah, okay, cool, we get it. Or maybe we thought that we already knew this stuff. So that's probably the worst outcome you can get by doing strategy, because at least you can have someone like having a big smile or maybe doing a high five, fist boxing. I don't know what happens, but I've seen it many times. When I knew the strategy was right, when I knew the insights were really valuable, people were really excited. And I think strategy should be inspiring as well. We can't forget that. In the end, it's about creating creative executions and not just sticking on the scientific stuff, because I've bored you with a lot of scientific stuff, but this is really important. I like to think of it as a fellowship of the strategy, where at the end of the strategy, you have this feeling that you and your client have this little, dirty little secret. You know how you're gonna change the world and attack Mordor, but nobody else knows, but you understand, and your clients understand, and they trust you with it. I think if you can create that feeling, you did something right. So, a few takeaways to wrap it up. Embrace friction. Always know when there's something wrong. Don't be afraid of it. Talk about it. Understand your own assumptions, your own biases. That's really important. Embrace complexity. If it sounds too simple, it probably is. Talk to others and be open to new disciplines, new ideas. Just some small plugs. Let's Talk Branding. Follow me on Twitter, Instagram, wherever. Listen to the podcast. And Ollie, of course, check it out if you want to, or contact us if you want any information. Voila, that's it. Thank you for your time.
Ollie? Yes. All right. We're just gonna speed on through in between you and some more drinks. Any of you know imposter syndrome? You know, I kind of feel like that as a strategist, like, what do I really do? Why would people listen to me? What do I really do? So imagine talking to a group of strategists and you kind of feel like, what am I doing here? I'm going to be honest, I've been in a workshop all day. I don't really care about this presentation this much. So not really a lot to lose. So I start with very low stakes. I'm going to talk to you about how we at In The Pocket use a framework, we do, to do digital product strategy. It's a talk called Everyday Innovation. I really hate the word innovation. My CEO is constantly telling me we should build a service around innovation as if innovation is something that happens once every 7 years. I'd rather think How can we just find the most innovative solution to an existing problem, or discover a new problem to solve, and let's just do that. So let's try to be innovative in everything we do. So for us, it is a classic. Who of you knows design thinking? This is going to be a very boring 30 minutes for you. We just keep arriving back at design thinking because it just really helps us. But we're not maniacs. It's not about the framework, but I really like the DNA that it contains. So I'm just going to give you some examples of how we do that. I'm Frederick. I have the pleasure to work with a very talented team of strategists and architects here at In the Pocket. I'm not going to tell you about podcasts. This has been done in previous presentations. I don't really feel the need to plug any podcast. I'm just going to let this slide speak for itself and just let the sweater do the rest of the talking. So it's really not about a weekly podcast called Computer Club. This is not really the point of this talk. I work for In the Pocket. I would like to thank the people who made this possible as well. Ollie, Bram, Brett, the people who helped organize this meetup or facilitate this. We're a digital product studio. We're in Ghent. We're in Leuven. What the fuck is a digital product studio? We like to think that we have everything it takes to build great digital software. We don't do any communications. It's just that simple. I like that there's experts in branding. I like that there's experts in communication. I leave it up to them. But if you need some software built, we can do that. So we're a digital product studio, cross-functional team, so engineers, designers, product managers, data scientists, QA, so basically any profile you need to think about that software and get it built as well. So we build digital products and platforms, strong focus on user. So what is it that we're really solving, but also the business side. It's not just enough that it solves something for a user. There is a business reality. We like to understand that as well. So we do anything from building strategies, coming up with platform architecture, designing software, shipping software. Most of our teams are cross-functional software teams, so they really develop software, deliver software, grow on that software. The team I work with is working more on making plans for a new platform, coming up with a new value proposition for a big company, looking at the company roadmap, so a bit preceding the delivery work. I had been hoping to tell you guys about our new process, but it's just not finished yet. You know, the more work you have, the less you spend time on your own narrative. We do work from mobile applications, where we started, evolving into web applications, a lot of cloud stuff, API stuff, more and more investing into machine learning, so making the products that we build smarter, and also heavily invested in AR, as this could be potentially a big new interface, so we don't really want to miss out on that. So this is our tech stack. So this is the types of interfaces or systems that we build. If I'm being romantic, I like to think that we in some way are building the stuff of the future. This is a miniature version of the Paris airport. So instead of them going around with their 2D plans, talking to new investors, new partners, they have these Microsoft HoloLens devices, and they can really present it in 3D. So a high Star Trek level there. So I like to think, when I've had a few drinks, when I'm being very romantic, I like to think we are really building the future. There is just one problem about the future. It's a lot. There is quite a lot in the future. This is a fact. There are many new technologies, many new interfaces. Just read the blogs, read the newsletters. And it's always chatbots are the new X, this is the new X, voice is the new thing. If you're not on this, you're missing out. which means that one of the key skills for the future, if you're a company making decisions and you need to make some choices at some point, you need to focus. You need to know of all these new possibilities, of all these new channels, what is it that I'm going to spend my limited number of resources in? And for us, I would like to think that design thinking is a way that helps us make those decisions better. You can never know for sure, but like Steph said, you can at least be informed. So how do we inform ourselves to making the right recommendation? So what is the framework for creating successful products and services? I like to think that we have some on our track record. So client approach us, we're quite expensive, so they approach us and they say, okay, we want to have one of these successful products and platforms. Let's have it. So what is this magical formula? I'm skipping ahead. I'm going to spoil my whole presentation just to make sure that there's not really something unexpected going to happen. So I'm going to tell you how one of our most popular apps is only used once, how one of the coolest things that we did failed in a very big way. Client really loves us. We built a luggage tracker, and it has no map in there whatsoever. So it's a luggage locating device without location. And we worked with one artist refugee and 9 students, and we did a lot of cool stuff that the Belgian government wasn't doing. So, of course, all of these statements should introduce some fiction, like why am I being very happy about things? This should feel as a bit of a friction. So hopefully I'll have that covered by the end of this presentation. So back to the magic formula. What is it? Here we're paying you a lot of money. Let's have this good piece of software. Let's just create it. And they think it goes something like this. Well, you make the solution. We should be live already. We're already behind on our competitors. It's costing us money. Just create the solution. Well, it turns out that there's quite a lot missing from this equation, namely the user. Who is it that your solution is intended for? And most importantly, what is the reality after the user, after your consumer, also after the person has used your solution? What does that look like? And then it turns out that your solution is not really that important. It's about what is a happy user? What have you done for this user? What makes her life better? So in essence, this contains everything, this visual contains everything that we feel very strongly about here at In the Pocket when designing software. Namely, starting with needs. What is it that you're solving? Even before you start thinking about the solution, what is your problem space? Defining success. Again, you are doing this before you start thinking about the solution. Because otherwise, your success criteria is just going to be, does my solution work? No, it's about what is the better reality. Exploring multiple solutions. Again, something that does not really come natural. Force yourself to look at alternatives, to think about more than one way to do it. Because again, in the world that we are living in, it would be very weird if there's just one way to solve a problem. Really force yourself to come up with alternatives. Sharing, get feedback. Make sure that you don't work on something for 2 years and then release it to the market and see what happens. Try to go back to that user as quickly as possible. Use any prototype, minimal version, whatever you can find to put something in the hands of the user. I like this one. Keep it simple. And if I do this presentation for a corporate audience, they're all like, yeah. But I'm like, no, you are the problem. You're making it very complicated. It's always, we need to add 10% more features. We really need to do this. We cannot release this if this is not in there. We cannot do it. But here I'm telling you, yeah, but when you're not releasing it, 90% of your other features are not being used either. So keep it simple. Don't do, we call this feature creeping. You know, it's always, let's add a bit more functionality, and in the end, you will have forgotten what you were building in the first place. Keep it simple. And then don't stop when it ships. We nearly never work on a project basis. In today's reality, with all the changing landscape, the changing market, the changing expectations from consumers, it would be very weird that you could build a solution and think you're done. You always need to have some sort of roadmap to keep iterating. It's only when it's been released that it gets very interesting. So that's when you really need to be on your toes to take into account how people are actually using it. So this sounds pretty simple, right? This sounds not like rocket science. I would hope that in this crew, I have not said something that you will walk home from and say, wow, this is a game changer. I did not know I had to solve a need, wow. Yet something funny happens. The moment you enter a big corporation, you lose this kind of DNA. You spend a lot of time in meetings, you spend a lot of time reporting about meetings, writing reports about reports, and you kind of lose this very simple way of addressing a problem. I have accidentally used my back button. This is what happens when you're not really fully prepared. So, what is design thinking? Well, it turns out you can't really convince the director of a big corporation for a 1 million project and say, look at this Super Mario visual. They don't really buy into this. What they do like is structure. They like a process. They like a framework. I'm sounding very Asian right now, like they like a framework. This is very racist, what I'm saying right now. But corporations like structure. They like a way of working that they can build their teams around. So design thinking, formalized framework of applying, I love this, the creative design process to traditional business problems. It means let's all be creative, not just the designer, not just the one who comes up with the solution, the concept provider, the innovation manager. It's more about how can you get everything. They alternate between going very broad, just taking it all in, and then focusing. So it's always within your need space, listening to the whole life of your consumer, then defining what is really worth going for. It's about exploring all different solutions, choosing the best one, and then when you're executing on the solution, trying out a lot of stuff, and then testing what works. Normally it's called a double diamond. We added the triple diamond, and our day rate went up by 20%. This is a true story. Now I'm very boringly going to talk you through all of these. I'm going to try to make it a bit pragmatic because I would sense that not all of this is new. So empathy. Yes, we are all customer-centric. We are all user-centric. We are all user-focused. It's try to find a manager who does not think of himself or herself as being very customer-centric. Yet, very little of them have actually spoken to a customer. Very little of them have actually spent a day in the customer support center listening to complaining customers. It's very easy to say you are user-centric, but are you really? Do you really know who you're working for? So this is the project. So the user doesn't live in PowerPoint presentations. Even calling it the user is a bit abstract. So you find a lot of briefings giving you a lot of bullet points about what the user wants. This is Xavier, who's an artist who's created a big joke. It's called Refu Interim. It started as a joke, as like refugees were coming to Belgium, taking our jobs. So he created like an interim agency to match refugees with the cultural sector who need like bar personnel, stuff like that. Every summer, we go on a summer camp. We do a Google Design Sprint with a lot of with some students, and we say, here's a cool challenge. Let's see how you solve it. So that case was for Refu Interim. A lot of refugees wanting to work, a lot of work just 2 people, volunteers, so hard to do the matching. So that's what we told them. That's all we told them. Look, there's a lot of willingness, but what happens? So you have Xavier, you have Raad, who's a super cool Syrian guy. It's only 3 days, this summer camp. The first half day is only spent talking to these people. So they're not even thinking about solutions, they're not designing, they're not developing. We're just saying, speak to these people. And that's where it gets really interesting. You see that everybody sees a different challenge. Some think more about the refugee, others think more about Xavier and how he gets his work done, others think about the place they end up working. And it's very beautiful actually to see all of these solutions coming out of it, and it just happens because they spend time talking and really understanding what they are doing. It's a decision that we make. It takes time, but you have to listen to users. So get out of the building, just do it, just speak to people. I have to be careful because I know there's people from Colruyt Group in the room. This is from Solucious. It's they have a research team, so this is their food service platform. They spent weeks going in the field, talking to people. What does your day look like? They have rooms full of user research. This is the stuff of user research boners. It's beautiful. It is beautiful. But let's face it, most companies, most people don't have the time to really do this thoroughly. This one I like, Paynes Gates Jobs. It's from the value proposition canvas. It's just a really good way to look at a reality. What is it that the user wants to do? What's frustrating him or her? What would be the desired outcome? It's a very simple way of looking at a problem, and I guarantee you, just forcing yourself to try to do this, and you will end up with a lot of insights. Experience mapping, customer journey mapping, stuff like that. Here's an interesting pointer. Everybody's doing it wrong. What people are doing is they're doing it at the end of their research. What have we learned? What does the journey actually look like? It's a lot more valuable if you do it at the start as well. What do we think the journey is like? What are assumptions? What do we not know? And then use this to do a lot more guided research. So it's not just a beautiful deliverable that you can print out in your room. It's really for identifying what is it that I do not know. This I like to call just enough research. You really need to think about how much time or effort should I spend, and that really depends on how deep do you need to go. Do you need to get a sense of the end-to-end journey, just as a starting point, like what is it from A to Z? What is it that I'm looking at? Or are you looking at something very specific? Are you looking at one particular flow that you really want to understand? Then go very deep, but never do the two. You'll lose yourself in details, you'll not see the big picture. Same with level of fidelity. Are you going to design this or not? If you're going to use this as a starting point for an internal brainstorm, just use Post-it, Sharpies, whatever. Are you going to use this to get buy-in for a €1 million project? Then by all means, have a designer look at it and really pimp it up, because this will be the document that secures your buy-in. So how much research? It's a difficult question. It really depends on what do you want the outcome to be. Yes, but no, but yes, but yeah, we want to be user-centric, but still though, we're already behind on schedule. This costs a lot of money. It's true. Capital One, US bank, quite traditional, use design thinking to reinvent themselves digitally. They have this cool thing on the ground floor of their corporate building. There is a coffee bar. There's a lunch place. You can go there for lunch freely. The only thing that you have to take into account is that at some point, some banker or product designer might ask you about how you save or how you invest. So what they did is they lowered the threshold. They just made sure that they always have access to people they can talk to. A lot of companies are doing this, making sure on Friday there's always customers coming over. And I will guarantee you that the slots will be filled weeks and months in a row. Just make it a habit, make it very easy. The post-it is the number of days they spent without talking to a user. If that goes beyond 10, they can't make any more decisions. They need to go back. They need to go to the coffee bar. I'm going to be totally honest, I do not know if this is true. I read it in a Medium post. So this is for someone, one I like to say, yes, it costs money. It costs whatever, half a day, prepare the interview, debrief the interview, you know the day rate. It costs money, it's true, but the cost of making assumptions is a lot higher. You know, Jakob Nielsen once said, you can build a wonderful product solving the wrong problem and it will fail. So you can do everything right, design-wise, technically, ship it as early as possible. If it turns out that you were solving something not worth solving, it doesn't even matter. So what is 5,000 euros on a whatever, 500,000 project? I've gotten very sick of this. I don't budget it separately because it's the first thing to go out of the offer. You know, it's like, yeah, needs to go down in price just a little bit. We can tell you what the customer wants. You know, we can skip that phase. No, it's a non-negotiable. It's part of how we work. Like a famous poet once said, the irony is that it's muted. This is very, just do it. Yeah, this is a joke. It doesn't always work. Journey mapping is not always the right thing to do. Flow charting, if you want to understand more about the functionalities of things. Service blueprinting, I know there's service design people in the room. A customer journey really looks at the customer point of view, but whatever happens behind the scenes, we don't care. A service blueprint takes that into account as well. So sometimes you will see that inefficiency on the front end is really caused by a lack of process behind the scenes. So sometimes you need a different lens of looking at things. Defining, so you've listened to a lot. This is very important. Don't make assumptions. Listen to the whole day. Listen to the whole week. Listen to the fight they had with their wife. Don't make the short list already. Make it after you've heard everything and then define what it is that the user is really wanting. If I ask you guys, what does this girl need? What would you say? A book? Finish the homework, it's even better. A ladder. Length. So what it is that you're doing, and this is very important, if you are defining the need to solve, never use a noun. If you are saying that she needs a book, she needs a ladder, what are you going to design? A ladder, a lower bookcase, stuff like that. But maybe this girl doesn't need the book. Maybe she needs to get ahead in life. Maybe she's from a difficult background, and knowledge for her is a way of getting in front of life. If you are framing the challenge that she needs height, you are going to design a ladder. If you are saying that she needs knowledge to get ahead, you will design homeschooling, you will design a lot of things. Just to tell you how powerful framing can be. If you already frame that the problem is the solution, you've already spent a lot of creative potential. And we have to challenge ourselves as well. If you are going to design a better TV guide, if you say the challenge is the TV guide, you'll design the most beautiful TV guide in the world. If you are saying, look, people come home after a hard day of work, they need to feel entertained as quickly as possible, then you'll maybe end up designing a personalized TV channel. I don't know. It's giving yourself a more interesting space. An IoT tracker, Internet of Things, you can track your luggage. Why would you want to know exactly where your luggage is. I do not know what relationship you have with your suitcase. What you do want to know, and this is something we discovered from user research, this is not even a big problem. Suitcases aren't getting that lost that often anymore. And within the day, nearly all of them end up with the user. It's not even a big problem. What is a problem is the stress. You end up, you have the carousel, and all the suitcases in the world are coming by, except yours. This is the stress that you have. Your holiday can't start until you've had that romantic moment with your suitcase. So the only thing this does is, when you have landed, and the suitcase is there as well, it just gives you a notification. We'll see you in 5 minutes, baby. That's all it does. If you're going on your plane to Cairo, and your luggage is going to Chicago, do you really want to know this before you leave? Do you want to know that you'll spend 8 hours being frustrated? No, what you want to do, we'll communicate in the background, tell your airline, look, you're going to have a very pissed off customer, make sure that there's a solution. It would be very easy to say, we built a luggage tracker, here's a blue dot, here's a map. This would be lazy design. If you go to what is really the stress that you're setting out to solve, you'll find a lot better solution. Recycle, when to put out the trash. This is really one of the most popular things we've ever built. It would be very tempting to just build a calendar, but that's not really a job to be done. People don't like looking at a garbage calendar. Not very surprising. But what you're really doing is making sure you don't have a fight with your partner. So the only thing this product does, you open it once, you tell it your address, and then it just sends you a notification. That's all it needs to do. That's how you solve it. It's just getting out of the way. Sometimes you like to use a challenge statement. Who are you helping? What are you helping there with? And what is a surprising insight? What is something that you learned from user research that you can build on? We also worked with VRT on the elections, young people and elections, and this is what VRT really thinks. So everybody needs an information website to know about politics. Is this a good challenge statement? No, Frederick, this is not a good challenge statement. You are a very, very good group. And why is it not a very good challenge statement? Indeed, it's too broad. Who is everyone? Indeed, everyone has one testicle. It's like an average that doesn't exist. Who is everyone? Show me this guy. Needs an information website? Yeah, that contains the solution. So you'll build a better website than the one that came before. And so they know about politics doesn't really tickle my pickle. It doesn't really make me enthusiastic to start solving this challenge. This is a lot better. Millennials that are disillusioned by politics. This is a problem we're solving, right? They need to see impact of policy on their lives. They're disillusioned. They don't really understand what is the importance. And this is very important. They don't like voting blank either. You would think, yeah, these young guys, these young kids, they don't care. No, but they're not proud of it. They're not proud that they go to the voting booth unprepared. They tell you, I don't feel proud about this. So this is a problem worth solving, right? This is a lot juicier than the one that came before. Next time you work with the product team, next time you work on a product with a team, write this one down just for yourself and see if it matches. It's sometimes surprising. A team that has been working together for 3 years, ask them, what is it that we're really solving? It's not always clear that the team is on the same page. This is very important. To be clear, this doesn't change very often. This is your mission, right? This is not something that changes every 2 months. This is something that you're aiming for the coming year, 2 years, even more. A good challenge statement constrains the challenge space, broadens the solution space. Don't solve everything, solve something very specific, but leave the creative space open. Ironically, it's always the other way around when we get a briefing. Insane details about which drop shadow needs to be on which button But what is it that we're solving? We don't know. The why, never there, but here's a lot of details. Focus is very important. Better to solve something than half-ass everything. If you have your customer journey, it's very tempting to say, I'm going to fix everything. Just fix something and start from there. The case from the VRT, one group, so again, they all looked at the same challenge. They all got the same starting points. One team said, I'm going to help young people talk about politics. They feel insecure, so they built a chatbot. You learn to discuss with the bot. You learn to discuss with somebody who shares your opinion. You learn to discuss with somebody who has a different opinion. So learning to discuss. Beat the bush, browser plugin. You read a big article. Give me the too long didn't read. This one is about the kernuitstap. This is what you need to know. And they focused on burgerbar, snackbar. It's the morning of the election. You have not been paying attention. Here's 5 questions. This is who you need to vote for. Ivan de Vadder was very pissed off about this one. Yeah, but you can't reduce it to 5 minutes. Ivan, but you have failed before. It is true. You have to tell him, look, these are people that you have not reached before. It's better that we give them some crash course than nothing, right? So not solving the whole problem, just solving one part of it. Thinking about the solution space, again, going for volume. So it's about alternatives, right? But we need to talk about it. Ideation, brainstorming, it's fluffy. Managers don't like it. It's, yeah, but why do we need to? I had a talk with Kirk, who's a creativity coach at Google. So I thought, here's a guy who can maybe tell me something interesting about this. He had a very interesting analogy. He says, think of ideas like options. You will not make a very expensive decision when you have just one option. That is not a very sensible thing to do. Don't invest 1 million just based on one option. But here's the good thing. The moment you create one more idea, 100% more options. So think of it like that. Even if you arrive back at your original idea, at least you'll feel confident. At least I thought about other things as well. It's counterintuitive. We all have this, right? The first big idea you have as a person, as a group, you fall in love with it. It becomes this love story, and then what happens? Blindly in love. All your friends will tell you, he's bad for you, she's bad for you. It's not just gonna work out, but you're like, no, but this is different. This is different. And then again, what happens? The whole creative space has been reduced to whatever you as a group left the first project meeting, and then just go on that. Another part, it's hard. You guys are quite creative people. I can feel this. I can feel this. So I would tell other people it's hard, but for you guys it's easy, but other people they find it hard. I'm not creative. This is not what I do. Well, that's normal, because normally a brainstorm is like you're sitting on a table, let's have some ideas. But it doesn't work like that. You don't come up with ideas from thin air. You need some sort of exercise. You need a way to do this. So for instance, we created this ideation card game. It's 75 cool companies, cool technologies, cool trends. Just throw them together and see what happens. Just as a starting point. How about looking at 75 things that are going well and stealing them? For instance, from VRT, Mashup Innovation, what about a marketplace for live user-generated content? Could be cool. You go into a concert, and then VRT is paying you for some streaming. A subscription model for sneakers that you just rent, so you don't have to buy them. You can just wear them and then just send them back. And the more sneakers you wear, the more exclusive gear you get. Could be something, I don't know. Copy-paste, just steal stuff. This is a piece of software. It's software for the leasing industry. So your fleet manager you want a new car, you tell your fleet manager, office manager what car you want. She has to get a quote for that car. She has to buy the car. This is software that has been designed in the 90s. You know, that kind of thing. It's still around. I have never encountered more hate than I was interviewing people who had to use this piece of software. I felt hated. I had to distance myself from it. I had to throw another guy under the bus. I was like, this guy made it. I'm going to solve it. This guy made it. And then we came back with the solution. We thought about it creatively. We used design thinking and stuff like that. And so we ended up, this is of course a wireframe. And the client was like, wow, it's almost like a web shop. It is a web shop. So if people are using this every day, why not use simple filters? Why not indicate the most popular cars within that car policy? Why not give them a very simple stepped process? Configure the car, order the car, this is what's going to happen. So why would we create something entirely new if we could just use something that people use already? A lot of people look at what competitors are doing, look at what a wholly different company is doing, but that is maybe facing the same problem. Remember the airport, the Microsoft HoloLens demo, Minecraft. You could look at your Minecraft creations in 3D. Ta-da! Paris Airport. Here's the invoice. We stole it. I'm not sure how it happened, I'm going to be honest. But just to tell you, just look at a whole different example and think about, could this not maybe do something? This is the room scale version. Look at this. Yes. This was a 70% budget increase. Non-negotiable. You need to have these kinds of details. It just doesn't work. Deciding. So you had a lot of ideas. Okay, of course, you can't build all of them. How do you get some consensus? This is something that I find very interesting. You're looking for volume. At some point, you need to choose. This is going to save you a lot of frustration in meetings. Before you have a meeting, tell people what it is you want. Do you want more ideas, or do you want to make a decision? Never do both at the same time. This is very frustrating. People who want to be creative feel bludgeoned by people being very critical. People being critical don't like being like that as well. Just tell people, look, we're still in the ideation phase. I want alternatives. Look, guys, we have the alternatives. It's time to make a decision. So making that decision, this is something I love. These are grown-up people with interesting careers. They have reached a lot of corporate success. And then you give them these stickers. You give them a sunshine sticker, a rainy cloud sticker, and you tell them, put your drawing on the wall and let's give each other stickers. There's no limit on the number of stickers. Just be positive. Make it very visual. I'm not going to say it's this guy, but let's say it's this guy. Let's say this guy really loves his own idea. This guy is quite dominant. This guy is actually really nice, but this guy. The moment that the whole wall is covered in sunshine, but his idea is covered in rain, he will have a hard time keeping the idea on the table. He'll have a really hard time saying, yes, but this idea, he'll be like, okay, I get it. I see the heat map. The group has spoken. Make it very visual. This is another one, right? The highest paid person in the room syndrome. Oh no, the boss wants to be part of co-creation. And then what happens? Of course, nobody dares to speak up. Stuff like that. Yes, an animation. Solo voting. If you have a really politically sensitive context, don't do the group voting. people will look at the highest paid person. Do it separately. Do it in silence, and then see what happens. Really do it in silence. Write down every feature idea, product ID, and have it move around the table. Just have everybody spend some time looking at it, thinking about it, going technical, and then scoring it. Like, what is the value of this idea? What I find really interesting, if half of the group says it's worthless and the other part of the group says it's genius, this tells you might be looking at a different situation. This tells me, are we understanding this idea in the same way? And are we understanding the challenge in the same way? It's interesting to have a clash, but you need to address it. You need to think, why is it that there's such a big difference here? This is a red flag. Then you would think, uh-oh, are we on the same, working on the same challenge? And then building the product, which is, I guess, what I could tell you most about, but I'm going to keep it very short. So again, you have a concept. You need to think about how that could look. Just prototype it. Again, different ways of doing it. Sometimes you just need to get a sense of, would this work? Just use a piece of paper and see what happens. Don't immediately go to your Sketch or Figma or whatever. Just try it out on paper. Does it make sense? Flows. If you need to understand how do all the features work together, don't spend time on details within design. Look at how the features come together. This is a lingerie fitting application for prima donna. So in the Pocket, you have two teams. One is working on lingerie software. The other is working on leasing ERP. The first day you get assigned, and then yeah. It was. I know I'm being very sexist here, but we had like an internship day, like when interns come to meet in the Pocket and maybe have an internship here. It was in the same room that we had this whole workshop. So the whole room was covered in brass, basically. The intake of interns was wireframing. This is a really good segue. Again, you really need to get a sense of, does it all work together? It's not about execution, it's about, does it make sense? Are we missing something? Is this addressing the problem? These are all tools that are freely available, very easy to use. You need to test something with users. That's the whole point. Don't test a PowerPoint presentation. Don't say, look, here's 5 bullet points. What do you think about it? Give them something that they engage with. Wireframing is something you can do in a matter of hours and days. Sometimes you need to spend time on details. This is a high-fidelity prototype. This is when you really need to get the execution right. Before you test it, you need to know how it feels. There's no data, there's no actual connection here, but the end user wouldn't know. Sometimes you need to do high-fidelity testing, otherwise the results aren't just that convincing. This one I love. Design the one-pager. We created a new software, a new service for Proximus for big festivals and shopping malls and stuff like that. Building the service is what? A 2-year project. We can't just build it and test it. What we did is we created the marketing material for it. And we just sent it to 20 clients. We just said, look, here's our new service. What do you think about it? See where they click. See the Hotjar. See what sparks their attention. Worst case, they click on tell me more. And then you can say, well, we're actually finishing up on the service. We'd love to have your thoughts about it. I like it. Just design your startup webpage, whatever, your new service page, put 200 euros of Facebook credits on it and see what happens. Would people buy it? Design the one-pager. Um, you'll learn as much from prototyping the solution as from studying the problem. You can spend all the time, you can spend years analyzing a problem. You'll probably learn just as much trying out prototypes for the solution. So that's very important. Your first prototype will tell you you're still missing a lot of the picture, but at least you'll know thinking about what the solution could be. And then validation. This is a prototype for the Prima Donna case. So lingerie fitting, it's not easy online. You need to see how it fits. If it feels comfortable, stuff like that. Before we created that, we said, look, what would make it that this is successful? And then, of course, it's, does it feel reliable? Is this advice you will follow? Would you buy this product if our solution tells you it's a good fit? Does it feel personal? But this is very important. Gerustgesteld, veilig. It's very intimate stuff. Do you feel at ease with this product? Is it something that you would feel like your privacy is being respected? So you define this before you think about that. And of course, this was not a good idea. We learned a lot about feasibility. This virtual you, she would range from being very small to being through the roof, which is very intimidating. So we learned a lot about the technology. We learned that the technology is just not there yet. But this is what the most important thing was. So you would go to one of their retail stores. So they were quite a high-profile retailer. It's quite expensive. They would have this smart mirror. It would measure you in 3D. It would create the 3D version of yourself. And then we would use algorithms to calculate how's the fit. Does it fit? Will it bother you or not? I have been told how this works. I would not know from experience. It would also create a replica of your face. You're in front of the mirror. But do you really want to see? You really want to see in photorealistic detail, look yourself eye to eye? No. So from all the user tests, people are like, this really creeped me out. I don't care if the advice is right. I really don't like having a giant version of myself there. So in the end, we settled on a much more abstract 3D model, which just gives you the, look, pay attention here, all that. Why is this a very important learning? This costs a lot of money. This costs a lot less. Don't think that validation has to mean that it works. Validation means that you've learned, and if it works, all the better, then please do continue. If it doesn't, well, hopefully you've done this in a matter of weeks, and at least you know. This is very important. It's not about confirming your own idea, it's about, thank God. Thank God we have not spent months or years on this already. If you have a lot of big dick energy, you don't test with prototypes, you test with live versions, you build an MVP. Who here knows an MVP? A minimum viable product. Most wrongly used word in the industry. Clients say, yes, we want an MVP, which means we're willing to lose one feature. But for the rest, we want it to be perfect. An MVP means what is the smallest thing you can build to learn. It's about how can we ship something that is not perfect, but at least it's live. So if we're going to do this whole MVP thing, it's about what do you want to learn. It's not about shipping 90% of your product. Sometimes we have clients and we say, look, we have a product and it's live and it's popular, but we want to improve. We want to increase the conversion flow, or we want to increase the efficiency. Can we just test? Can we A/B test? Can we just change this button around? They go crazy. Yes, but people will see it. Yes. But what about our brand experience? Yeah. No. Testing on 1,000 users live, it's stress. For big companies, it is stress. Facebook, and I'm well aware of the irony that Facebook is not really the best example right now. Maybe they're A/B testing a bit too much on society. But have you ever talked to each other after this talk about the bottom tabs? They will be different with everybody you talk to. They're constantly experimenting with Marketplace, Watch, whatever. They're testing on more than 2 billion users. So why would you not test on a sample set of 1,000? So make it your own. So starting with needs sounds very obvious, but does it really contain what is the challenge? Like Steph said, challenge it. What gives you the idea that it's like this? Can I see the insights? Can I see the interviews? Have you spent time in the field? Is it really, or is it just an informed opinion? Define clear goals. What is success? Again, not when you're already working on it, before. What is the North Star metric? Because otherwise, you're just going to measure your own product. Give me any product, I will give you positive metrics. Just put me in a room with your boss, I'll give him the good news show. I'll always find metrics that are positive. But are they the key metrics? Is this what you really wanted to solve? Volume, iteration, force the intuition that you have to go for your first big idea. Force yourself always to at least come up with 1 or 2 alternatives. Simplify, keep it simple, just ship it, and then iterate and improve on it. This is most important. This sounds like this is like a linear process. You jump through all of the hoops. Reality is a lot messier. You will constantly go back and forth. You'll try something, turns out you need more research. You try a prototype, turns out you need more research. It's messy. That's how it is. The way I like to think about it, it's a mindset. It's a checklist. If you're working on something, do we spend enough time talking to our customers? Have we defined what we really want to solve? Are we forcing ourselves to think about alternatives? And are we testing those alternatives? I will guarantee you that if you don't do these things, the products that you will build or the campaigns that you come up with will be a lot better. I'm done listening to myself. So I would like to, do this. You want to do an outro?
Yeah, at first you were thinking of doing a Q&A, but then we said let's not do a Q&A. If you have questions, all of us are there. Thank you very much to Freddy and Steph. I think it was great. Thanks to everyone here for being here. It's still unbelievable how many of you are here. So let's all just talk to each other.
Let's do it again.